the leaked SCOTUS memo on what grounds they could overturn Roe v. Wade, and also over the past year or two, in state legislatures such as Texas, Florida, Oklahoma, and others, Georgia, they've passed some pretty Alabama restrictive abortion bans and taken away a lot of medical autonomy and bodily autonomy from American citizens, such as restricting or banning common contraceptives such as IUDs, the Plan B, morning after pill type medical abortions, defining a life at the point of fertilization, or making abortions illegal after 6 weeks, which many women don't even know they're pregnant at that point. Eliminating exemptions for cases of rape and incest, or restricting a doctor's ability to advise an abortion based on the mother's health. What would qualify an abortion for health reasons, or if even if the fetus wouldn't be viable outside of the womb, there's you still have to carry it to term under some of these new bans, and it's just outrageous. And I understand the strong emotions people have on this topic, but ultimately it boils down to the right of the individual. If it's a woman's body, it's her choice to make whether to carry that pregnancy to term or not. And one thing that always boggles my mind is you have this GOP delegation that is extremely energetic about protecting life and passing these abortion bans. And I think the only reason they care about it is because it generates so much political energy and probably money for them. I don't think they honestly give a shit about the lives of children, and I'm going to lay out a case for that. So let's first look at this report by the Geneva International Center for Justice, independent, nonprofit, non-governmental organization. This group has published several articles that I found fairly enlightening. This one is about sanctions against Iraq. In the first Gulf War, and under the first President Bush, we, with the UN, passed a total financial and economic embargo on the nation of Iraq. And it's led to the death of over 1.5 million Iraqi citizens, and most of those were children. Pre-sanctions, Iraq was, a totally functioning country, modern amenities, education, healthcare, and a center of, a great cultural center in the Middle East. And we completely destroyed that nation. I want to scroll down. This is a great report, by the way, if you just want to read through the whole thing. I'm just going to highlight a couple of this stuff. Under the impact of those sanctions, fresh, clean water supply decreased by 55%, which obviously led to other health effects. Treatment of waste disposal decreased, which would have led to lots of health problems due to the lack of sanitary conditions. Thriving education system was crushed. Enrollment declined, particularly among girls. One reason we invade these nations is so that we can create equality for women, and yet here we destroyed equality and sent this country, back into the Stone Age, so to speak. We cut the annual income per capita by a factor of 10, from $2,500 $100 to $250, to where people were living on, roughly 50 cents a day. The health sector, we created shortages in medicine and medical equipment, and which led to a continuing decrease in the quality of care for the Iraqi citizens. Severe acute food shortages, which led to malnutrition and death. The child mortality rate was between 100 and 120 deaths per 1,000, 10 to 12% child mortality rate, which is just absolutely sickening to think of all the children we murdered through these acts, and for what reason. George W. Bush came in later and finished what his father started. We invaded Iraq under false pretenses, false intel fed to us by the CIA about weapons of mass destruction. We toppled a government and put a country into pure chaos. For what? It was for a handful of powerful political elite, ruling class in Washington, D.C., to further expand their political ambitions and the geopolitical power of the United States empire. And this is the kind of crap that I will absolutely vote against and will not support. The sad thing is that this isn't a red or blue issue. This is both sides of the aisle. The majority of our congressional representatives in the House of Reps and the Senate. Let's see. RuPaul. Cool stuff, but not what I'm going to this website for. This is an article by USA Today. Biden's sanctions. We left Afghanistan. We left Afghanistan, and that was, we needed to leave. We never should have been there in the first place. But, we left behind weapons and military infrastructure, which fell into the Taliban's hands. But we are still waging war against this nation, and we are doing it through economically and financially. We've completely embargoed, frozen their assets, and 22.8 million Afghans, more than half the population, are facing acute food insecurity, and that's according to UNICEF. And it's estimated that, more people will die from this economic catastrophe which the U.S. has created than in the 20 years of warfare that we waged in the Afghanistan state. And you can Google this and read more about it. More than 1 million children under the age of 5 at risk of dying due to severe acute malnutrition. And this policy is supported probably by more than 95% of Congress. Yemen. Almost 400,000 people have died in the conflict raging in Yemen. And that conflict is being waged by the Saudis. And we sell billions of dollars worth of weapons to the Saudis. And only a few congressional members of Congress have opposed this and raised this as an issue. Will absolutely align with senators such as Rand Paul on this. And not just Rand Paul, but people have also opposed this, AOC. And Bernie Sanders at times has been right on these policies and opposed these arms deals and these crippling economic sanctions that kill civilians, particularly children, due to food and medicine shortages. Let's look at North Korea. This is a 2019 report, and in just the past year, 4,000 civilian deaths in North Korea tied to sanctions. Mainly due to medicine and food shortages. And of those 4,000 deaths in 2018, 3,200 were children under the age of 5. That's more than 75% of those deaths, and then 72 of them were pregnant women. If we are pro-life, if we are truly pro-life and pro-peace in America, we would be choosing actions that do not cause death, that do not harm civilians, and sanctions are ineffective at curbing bad leaders. They just don't work. They have a long proven history of not causing any type of political change. The only thing they do is kill civilians, particularly children. We should not be passing sanctions at all. If we need to go to war with a nation because they are attacking us, it's for our defense, then we just need to go to war. The problem is that we haven't gone to war with a nation because they're attacking us since World War II. And all these conflicts we're getting drawn into are merely for power and control on the world stage, and exerting our influence on these nations and taking out leaders who don't get in line with the political elite of Washington, D.C., such as we saw in Iraq and we're seeing now unfolding in Ukraine. Just Google the Orange Revolution or Euromaidan and read up on that. We absolutely have been meddling in Ukraine, and it's not just those two events. Those events in themselves were disgusting, in that we were reaching across the globe and dumping millions of dollars into influencing elections and creating a recall in the Ukrainian state to put a pro-West versus pro-Russian leadership into Ukraine. And but just look at the events after the Cold War. The Berlin Wall comes down, and we promise to seek peace with Russia and Eastern Europe and not expand NATO, and yet NATO has continually marched towards Russia. NATO has we've placed U.S. troops. We do U.S. military actions in Eastern Europe, and we've placed U.S. nukes all around Russia, Turkey, France, Belgium, Germany. There's a fifth state in there. And why? So that we can encroach on and wall in and weaken the Russian state. And we've pushed these Eastern European states towards this. And we say it's for democracy and economic success and improvement. And the lie there is that we could give those states all those benefits just through free trade and open relationships. We don't need any of those states to join NATO so we can give them those benefits. NATO is an aggressive military pact and is only seeking to hedge in and control and weaken the Russian state. And we put Ukraine on a crash course with Russia, and we're more than happy to use them as a pawn in a proxy war against the Russian state. Just like we used Afghanistan as a pawn against a proxy war against the Soviets in the 80s to weaken them. And that didn't turn out badly at all. And so we see all this death, this state-funded death that has a wide political spectrum of support from the left and the right. And it's disheartening and overwhelming. And I want to play a clip.
So much death.
Here from one of my favorite shows. Will it not let me go full screen?
What can men do against...
Okay, I really want to make this full screen. Maybe I have to make this full screen. Okay.
So much death. What can men do against such reckless hate? Ride out with me. ride out and meet them. For death and glory. For Rohan. For your people. The sun is rising.
Look to my coming at first light on the 5th day. At dawn, look to the east.
Yes. Yes. The horn of Helm Hammerhand shall sound in the deep. One last time. Yes! Let this be the hour when we draw swords together. Fell deeds awake. Now for wrath, now for ruin, and the red dawn. For the Avengers!
So we purchased a state-of-the-art fiber laser.
Let's see. So, I love Lord of the Rings, by the way. Gerald Tolkien is basically a master of creating, conveying important, beautiful messages. And I guess the only thing better than playing that clip would have been actually taking the book off the shelf and reading that passage. But this is how I feel when I see I grew up, I was born in 88. I was in junior high I was in the 7th grade when 9/11 happened. And, then the ensuing invasion of Iraq, and then Afghanistan, the civil war in Syria, the coup in Libya, the conflict in Yemen, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which, wasn't a few months ago. I mean, that kicked off when they invaded the Donbass region under the Obama administration and annexed Crimea. And that was triggered by the Euromaidan event. We were pumping millions of dollars over there to put, our guy into power instead of Russia's guy. And my thought is, listen, we should be neutral on the world stage. We should only wage war against other nations when they are attacking us, and we should have a clear declaration of war from U.S. Congress, which we haven't had one since World War II. And we see this ongoing death and destruction, and we're spending trillions of dollars, inflationary dollars, on expanding this bloated giant that is the U.S. Department of Defense, the Pentagon, and our operations. And there's so much waste and so little oversight, and we see so much death and destruction, particularly among civilians. In these zones, these conflict zones, the most vulnerable population are children. Children die at higher rates than the soldiers in these conflict zones. And yet, in the name of peace, in the name of democracy and freedom, we invade these nations, we pump weapons into these nations, and ultimately we kill children and civilians. And it has to stop. And that's why I'm running for U.S. Congress. That's why I'm running for the Senate seat currently held by Mike Lee. Mike Lee has been in the Senate for 12 years, and he has been ineffective at building a coalition, of people who oppose war and death and want to seek a peaceful foreign policy. And there's politicians all across the political spectrum, a few, that support this message, and we need to bring more on board and elect those type of people. Look at the people up for election in your states right now. Look at the people up for re-election in the state of Utah. There's only one Senate seat open, but there's 4 House of Representative seats. And if you look at how they've voted, their record is awful on their vote for sanctions, weapons flowing into these countries, money going to these countries so they can continue these conflicts. And it's got to stop. The world will destroy itself, and it will be driven by the United States of America if we don't start choosing peace. And to me, that's the number one issue why I'm running for the U.S. Senate seat. At the end of the day, you're free to live your life however you want, as long as you're not acting in violence against other individuals. I don't care what you believe religiously. I don't care how you express yourself. I don't care whether you want to, smoke crack or, whatever. That doesn't matter to me. On an individual to individual basis, I might advise you to do one thing or another, but on a federal government basis, or as a state government basis, or even on a city government basis or county government basis, there's a lot of things that just the government shouldn't get involved in, and just let the individual live their life. But we cannot continue to publicly fund these acts of aggression on the world stage and destabilize nations, which leads to death and destruction. And so please go to my website, jimmyforutah.com. You can read more on my other stances and more on this. And you can also donate to my campaign there. I am I'm just a school teacher. I'm not super wealthy. I'm not running a multi-million-dollar campaign like Mike Lee or Evan McMullen. I'm running a multi-dollar campaign, and most of those dollars have come from my own pocket so far. And so please go to jimmyforutah.com and learn more about. I'm just a normal, everyday American, and I just want to advocate for peace on the world stage and freedom for the individual. Thank you.